So welcome back to the Expert Edge. Today's conversation, we're talking about unlocking confidence in you as a communicator. One of the biggest fears in the world is the fear of public speaking. And I can see why it is, because when you get on stage, everyone's looking at you, everyone's waiting for you. And there's this fear that comes on in you, especially even if you're running a webinar, right? You've got 50 people on the line, everyone's watching and waiting. There's this fear of, am I going to mess up? Am I going to look stupid? Am I going to look silly? I remember for me, I struggled with that fear for so long. Now, what's cool is I wrote a lot about this in One Presentation Away. So I wanted to do a blatant plug for my new book, One Presentation Away. Do you know what's interesting? As an author, I am starting to have conversations with people now where, because the book's been out for 6 or 7 months now, and I'm starting to have conversations with people now on webinars and workshops and just meeting people in different events, and they're like, oh my gosh, I read your book, it was phenomenal, or I read your book, I love this chapter, or I was an hour and a half into your book and then I went and joined one of your programs, or whatever it was, right? And it's been fascinating watching this cycle happen, because with launching a book, you don't hear anything for a long time, right? You have obviously the people who are raving fans of your stuff, and they're like, they'll send you a testimonial or something really quickly, and then it kind of goes silent for a while. And so I'm starting to see the cycle come through of people who are reading my book and getting feedback and all that sort of stuff. So I appreciate you, for those of you who have grabbed my book, One Presentation Away. If you haven't yet, just head over to Amazon or wherever you want to grab a book and grab it. I think on Amazon right now, especially in the US, it's on sale right now, like 60% off or something. Like it's literally like $11. It's so cheap. So definitely grab the book if you haven't grabbed it yet. I was looking at it just now. There's a whole section on building confidence, on unlock. It's actually chapter 3, unlocking your confidence. And we talk about creating meaning, reframing meaning, identifying new beliefs, building more evidence, some mindset shifts around feeling confident in selling, how to get out of reading and start connecting, realizing the fact that no one knows what you're supposed to say, so it doesn't even matter if you mess up, about getting your message into your body. There's so many little strategies and techniques and stuff that I share in the book. I just really want you to get results. I want you to transform. So make sure to head over and grab the book if you haven't yet, onepresentationawaybook.com, or you can just head over to Amazon or wherever you want and just grab it. I think you're going to love it. Let's start off today's session talking about overcoming the fear of public speaking. Hey, it's Colin, and you are listening to the Expert Edge podcast. I was a professional speaker for over a decade, and now I focus on helping coaches, speakers, and course creators to speak and sell on virtual and live stages. The Expert Edge podcast is weekly content focused on helping you build your expert business. We cover marketing, storytelling, sales, communication skills, and so much more. Thanks for taking the time to tune in, and make sure you subscribe and follow us on all our social channels so you don't miss a thing. Let's listen to today's episode. So what does it mean to show up confidently when you speak? What does it look like and feel like to step onto a stage and to feel more like yourself, like even more amplified, even more connected to yourself, to your audience, to your message? That's the conversation we're about to have. I want to share with you a few strategies that have worked for me, and I want you to test them out. Now, you can use these in not just when you speak, but you can use these in just general life, like feeling more confident to get on a sales call, feeling more confident to show up at a networking event. All of these things are going to help you to feel more confident when you show up, when you speak, and when you communicate. So let's have a conversation about what they can be. The first big idea is an idea that I learned early on in my life, because I know for me, my earliest experience of speaking on any sort of stage was actually not doing it professionally. It wasn't being a coach. It wasn't doing anything like that. It was actually in school. And I remember I was 13 years old, sitting in a classroom, and I was in an all-boys school. I had this little blue kind of cub hat on and high socks with garters on, and it was coming down to me, and all of us were taking turns to read a passage from the Bible. It was during scripture class, and I remember it came to me, and I started to read. And as I started to read, I started to stutter. I started to fumble on my words, and as I did that, I noticed that my whole world just like shrunk. I don't know if you've ever experienced that before, where it feels like everything around you just goes hazy, and I had like tunnel vision, and I felt overwhelmed, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. And I remember going through that experience and leaving it and making this meaning from this situation, this circumstance, that because I couldn't read and speak in front of my other colleagues or my classmates, I must be an idiot. Like, I must be stupid. There must be something wrong with me. And I really unconsciously latched onto that belief. And the problem with that belief of me believing that I'm an idiot is that it hindered how I showed up in my life. I showed up as a smaller version of myself. And I found myself every single time I was asked to do a presentation or speak in front of an audience, whether it be 3 minutes or 30 minutes, I was freaked out. And to be quite frank, it is like the last thing I thought that I would be teaching. Speaking in public, speaking to an audience. It's one of the last things I ever thought that I would be teaching. But the power that I learned through these techniques I'm about to share helped me to move from thinking I'm an idiot and completely freaking out in front of an audience, because what that led to was every single time I stood in front of my classmates or maybe youth group or my university students, my college friends, and did a presentation, I would physically shake. Like, my hand would shake so much, I would have to grab it with the other hand, and then my knee would start shaking and knocking. And then I'd have to put the microphone down and take a deep breath. Like, I would have like this visceral reaction from speaking in front of an audience. And I know now why that happened. And I think it's going to make sense today why that happened. And so I want to share with you some ways that I've made that shift from going from shivering to truly showing up on stage and being able to speak in front of thousands of people at a time and feel great, feel connected, feel present in the moment. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think what's interesting is I just got off a podcast because we're obviously promoting the book at the moment. And I got asked a great question. And the question was, do you think that there are some people who are just naturally good at speaking on stage, and then there's like the rest of us? And I really think that I believe that my answer was that yes and no, because I think that there are always, in I think any skill, doesn't matter what it is, there's always a subset of people who are just naturally good at it. But really it's like 10%, right? Maximum 10%. And then there's a subset of people who really probably that shouldn't be their main thing to do, right? We all know maybe one of those people. They probably shouldn't be a speaker, or they shouldn't be speaking on stage all the time. It's just not what they're supposed to do, right? And then there's like 80% in the middle. I was in the middle, by the way. Like, this is a skill that I had to learn and hone. It wasn't naturally something that I was good at. And I even think the people who are naturally kind of inclined to it, if they don't learn these skills that I'm about to talk about today, their speaking's actually still average. So when it comes down to it, I mean, I will say every single coach I've met, it's very rare that I'll meet someone. I would say majority, like 95% or more of coaches and course creators that I meet can be exceptional speakers, because you wouldn't have got into this if you didn't have any sort of like dynamic about you. Maybe it's knowledge that you have, insights you can share, experiences that you've had. I think all of us have had that. And if you've got that, you've got the ingredients of being a great speaker. And I think there's an argument to say that being an introvert, you've even got the ability to be even a better speaker. A lot of introverts are a lot more thoughtful, deeper thinkers, insightful, where potentially an extrovert, they're trying to just, say what they want to say and not actually really listen to what the audience is hearing, right? And that's a generalization, obviously. But there are a lot of great speakers out there who are massive introverts. In fact, a lot of the most successful people I know are actually introverted, right? I'm extroverted, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a naturally great speaker. And so let's talk about those skills today, but specifically about how do you find your confidence? Because maybe you've lost your confidence. Maybe you've lost your confidence when it comes to communicating your ideas, selling what you do, growing your business. I don't know. But I want to help you to rebuild your confidence. So the first big idea is this, and this can change absolutely everything. Even if you just take this one idea, I think, this will be well worth our time together. The first idea is this, is that you have to get your focus off yourself and into service. In other words, you need to focus on serving people, not what will they think of me? What will they think of myself? So the biggest thing that happens with any time someone's speaking on stage is if you're coming into your presentation, there's a whole kind of process that I take people through, which is a focus on self, which is the lowest. The next level is a focus on intuition. The next level is a focus on the structure of the presentation. The next level is a focus on the skill of the communication. And the final top levels are a focus on the audience and then ultimately the purpose. There's actually multiple layers to this. And so, but if you can move your shift off yourself and move it onto the audience, you jump like 4 or 5 ladders and you focus on your audience, you focus on what they're going through. In other words, you feel their pain. This is what I want you to do. I want you to think about, do this exercise with me right now as you're listening. I want you to think about someone who you've worked with. And I want you to think about before they started working with you, what pain were they experiencing? What were their concerns, their worries, their difficulties? And what were their desires? Like, what did they want to experience? How did they want to have breakthrough in their life? I want you to think about, like, even picture them specifically. Picture them at home, maybe they're with their kids and they're stressed, they're overwhelmed. They want to feel a sense of meaning and results in their life and purpose and like all those things, right? I want you to imagine that. Now I want you to imagine that you were in front of that person, but that person was multiplied 100 times. And they're in front of you and they are in a challenge. They're in difficulty. They're in a place where they're like, I need help, right? Imagine they're in that place and you're in front of them and you have got something that can help them. As soon as you focus on helping them, on serving them, on helping them get to their next level of seeing a breakthrough in their life, how do you feel about communicating to 100 of those people when you really stop and think about it? Imagine they're in front of you and you were there to help them, to serve them. You had something that was helpful and they weren't judging you. They weren't going, is this stuff good enough? They already know it's good enough. Like, there's nothing to prove. There's just everything to give, everything to serve. When you think like that, how do you feel about your speaking? How do you feel about your speaking? Do you feel good? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel more confident? I bet you do, right? That's because when you get your focus off yourself and you get it onto the audience, and even more than that, you get it onto the purpose that you feel in your life, all of a sudden your confidence actually becomes irrelevant. It's fascinating. What if you don't actually need confidence? Because sometimes confidence just feels like this esoteric, difficult kind of conceptual thing to get a hold of. What if you actually don't even need to be confident? What if you just simply need to get into service mode? Because when you get into service mode and you start helping someone, you become less self-critical, less self-conscious, and you become more of service. And when you do that, everything changes. Does that make sense? And so that's the first big idea. And that little exercise, I don't think I've shared it like that on the podcast. That's something we do with our clients. But that's a really cool exercise. And that exercise is one of the exercises that we talk about in the book, right? In One Presentation Away. And so that's just one of them. Let me give you another insight with feeling more confident speaking and selling on stage. The second big insight is to get present. Once again, this is a strategy that we teach in the book. Getting present, the power of presence. So often people say, Colin, how do I bring more presence when I speak? How do I bring more presence? Now, obviously, there are some technical sides of that, which is how you use your tone, how you pause, right? How you actually connect with your audience. But do you know where it all starts? Do you know where presence actually starts? It starts in presence, right? I know it sounds like I just said the same word, but it actually starts in you being present. Think about a time you've had a conversation with someone and you talked to them, maybe it was at a networking event, and they didn't give you your presence. Or maybe you were having a conversation with your partner and they didn't give you their presence. They're looking away, they're distracted, they're focusing on something else. How do you feel when you're talking to your partner and they're not giving you presence? How do you feel? You probably feel frustrated. You feel like, oh man, this is annoying, right? Or you feel disconnected. That is what happens. That is what happens when you aren't present. But as soon as you become present to the circumstance, the situation, the person, everything changes. And so just learning to be present in the moment, doing some practices that get you present in the moment will actually increase your presence when you speak and present. Now, what are some ways you can do that to get present? Well, there's some really great grounding exercises. Even just wiggling your toes, just feel, even right now, just feel your toes, how your toes feel. Maybe have a deep breath. Just take a deep breath in and just notice how your breath feels going through your nostrils. Another thing is you look around and say 5 things. Like in front of me, I'm looking at a camera. So I could say camera, a light, right? A phone, a box, a pen, a screen. You literally say the things and not the meaning of the things, right? Nothing, you don't interpret anything. You say literally what it is. And when you do that, it actually regrounds you. It reconnects you with yourself and the moment. And so learning to be present and practicing presence is actually one of the fastest ways to bring more presence to feel confident. The third big idea is just learning to ask better quality questions. So often we ask really poor quality questions. And I will say that, I know for me, when I was doing my coach training, that was a massive focus of it. When I was learning to be a life coach, when I originally started coaching, the whole focus of it was really just on questions, on how do you ask a good quality question of someone. And in fact, the quality of the question that you ask determine the quality of your life. I think it was Tony Robbins who said that, which is so true. In other words, when you ask a different quality question, you get a different quality, or you get a different answer. I remember for me, the first time I really got serious about growing my business, and I asked the question, which was, who do I need to be to make $100,000 in 1 hour? Who do I need to show up as to do a presentation where I make $100,000 or more than 6 figures in one presentation? And that question led me to showing up differently in my life, in my business, for my audience. That question led me and allowed me to do $154,000 in that next presentation. And it literally changed the trajectory of my life. And so rather than asking yourself a question like, what will they think of me? Will my content be good enough? Or, questions like that. Ask yourself a question like, if I was to show up fully and serve my audience, how would I feel? Ask yourself a question of, what is the gift in this experience? Ask yourself a question of, how can I serve these people at the greatest level? When you ask yourself a different question, a question like, what are they really going through? What's their biggest struggle, their biggest desire, and how can I help them? Ask yourself a different question and you're going to get a different feeling, because do you know what a question is? It's like a flashlight. It's like a torch. What it does is it moves the flashlight and it focuses on a specific feeling, emotion, or experience. It moves your attention. I can imagine it's almost like one of those, those big lights that they use like in jail when they always see in those movies where they're chasing the person. That's what it's like. It's like your questions are actually like those big flashlights where they move around, those spotlights, and they find things, but that's your brain. Your brain is just looking around. If you ask yourself a question like, what will they think of me? Will they like me? Will my content be good enough? Will I be judged? Will I look like an idiot? Will I forget what I'm going to say? We all ask ourselves those questions. But the reason we ask those questions is because our brain is working overtime to protect us. Our brain is working overtime to keep us safe. And the problem with that is that we stay in fear, we stay in resistance, we stay in stuck mode where we are, rather than stepping out and actually making a difference. Now, we've talked about the idea of using presentations to grow your business a lot. And in fact, that's what the core idea is in One Presentation Away. And in fact, there's a whole chapter taking you through 5 or 6 different exercises, specifically all about learning how to feel more confident to step on stage. I've just taken you through a few right now. So has that been helpful? I hope it has. We talked about being present. We talked about turning your focus of yourself onto service. And we talked about asking better quality questions. When you do those 3 things, what will happen is you will show up with more confidence. And in fact, it's going to become less about even confidence and more about just connecting, more about serving your audience.